Coogs House. All right, never in doubt, right? Okay, I'll admit it. I got a little nervous.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs Day, the podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Aintor, to break down all things Cougs. If you're a U of H fan or just a hater can step by, please be sure to subscribe down below. That way you can listen to the Cougs in your newsfeed each and every day. We appreciate you making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Welcome back to the YouTube channel. It's good to see you again. We're about at 800 subscribers. Good for you all. Thank you. Make sure you keep hitting subscribe down below. Once we get to 1,000, we give some away. We're doing that every 250 subscribers from here on out. So make sure you hit subscribe and then comment and let us know what you think about the Houston and Northern Kentucky game, as ugly as it was. If you don't want to talk about it anymore because it was an ugly win, tell us if you like potato chips or tortilla chips. It is championship time of year. All right. So in this game, there's not a pretty way to go about this. Houston did win 63-52, but like I said, it was not an easy or pretty win. In the first section, I want to talk about a couple of key injuries. Obviously, Marcus Sasser out the gates, Jamal Shead we found out about afterwards, and those kinds of things, kind of how the game went with those. In the second segment, I want to talk about praising some of the freshmen, because in the absence of some of the upper class leadership, we needed those freshmen. In the third segment, I want to start looking ahead to Auburn. Now, admittedly, we are scheduled to have a Saturday special episode with Zach Blackerby of Locked On Auburn for a full in-depth breakdown of that. So that third segment might feel a little fast and rushed because more of that is to come. But first, let's jump in and talk some about how this game went. Worth pointing out, it was a slugfest of the 5 Northern Kentucky starters. 3 played 38 minutes and 1 played 39 minutes. They rode their horses through and through. Houston's defense did prevail. They held a 68.5 points per game team to 52 points per game. Northern Kentucky shot just shot 15% and from 3 and 27.5% from the field. Did shoot 9-10 from the free throw line. The big deal in this game for Houston's defense was giving them 18 offensive rebounds. It felt like the guards could not get involved in the offensive rebounding game if Juwan Roberts or Jarace Walker or Reggie Chaney did not come down with the offensive rebound. With defensive rebound, it went to Northern Kentucky. Now, I say that to say, I guess I should point out, a couple of Coug guards did have defensive rebounds. Chamon Mark ended up with 6 after some stuff down the stretch. Jamal Shead had 3, Marcus Sasser 2. So it wasn't 0-0, but it was not great. The big momentum shift in this game emotionally, though, was shortly before half when, after shooting a fadeaway jump shot in what was a tightly contested game to that point, Marcus Sasser limps to the sideline. Now, I say limps because that's the best adjective, but it wasn't like an exaggerated limp or anything like that. But he clearly was in a little bit of pain with that groin again. He said himself afterwards that he felt nearly 100% before the game. That's why he pushed himself to be out there. No coach pushed him, I guess. He wanted to be out there playing. And to be fair, in the 14 minutes, he did shoot 2 of 5 from the field. He did face more or less a box-and-1 type of double team for a lot of it too, and then was 1 of 3 from behind the arc. Again, he did say he felt 100%, and he didn't hurt himself defensive sliding, although he did take a little bit easier defensive assignment being a little banged up. But it sounded like he planned off of it to shoot a fadeaway too. If it's the shot I'm thinking of, I believe it actually went in. And then he clearly just didn't quite feel right after that. They subbed him out at halftime. And you could kind of feel a little bit of a deflation. Frankly, all in all, we've seen Houston have rough first halves and come out and have a big 20-point, 25-point win in the second half, right? Had Marcus been healthy the whole time, this kind of was feeling like it was going to be one of those kind of moments. And then there was this extra gut punch at halftime in which it was like, oh, crap, what's going on? Marcus is still questionable as far as every listing is going to go for Saturday's game against Auburn. If it were a betting man, I bet it's the same thing where he warms up and tries to give it a go. I bet they're a little bit quicker on pulling him out in that instance, just because he did re-aggravate it on Thursday. There will be plenty of time for this later in the spring and summer, but I think hindsight 2020 thing will always be everyone says that he should not have played. I think also logical conclusion there would be, simply put, a groin injury usually takes more than a week to heal, and he just hurt it last Saturday. So how could it have been healed? I get all of that. I also get, though, when you're a coach, if the kid says, I'm good to go, and you missed out on the Final Four last year because you didn't play him in the Elite Eight game, how you might feel like it's time to listen to the kid. I get all that. I get both sides of the coin. That's a later breakdown, I'm sure. The other big injury was, and I kind of noticed Jamal Shead kind of limping around throughout the game. He didn't seem like himself. He apparently hyperextended his knee at some point and felt a little banged up in the first half of this one. I noticed it because he wasn't running what I call the HB dive plays. Like, think like Madden, think like just up the gut, up the gut, up the gut. He typically gets 3 or 4 of those a game for, again, 6 or 8 points, maybe a nice drop off. He did not have that kind of spring this step in this one. Frankly, he kind of let Tremont Mark take the tougher defensive assignments and a lot of times. And I also think it led to his 6 turnovers. The big story on this for Jamal Shead was not playing hurt until after the game. In the game, it was that he had 6 turnovers. The most in a game in his career to this point was 4, right? And so it was a big, like, what is going on with Jamal kind of thing, just as far as how he was playing. Afterwards, we find out that he hyperextended his knee at some point. I will say that it didn't seem to be bugging him on his jump shot. It went, make sure I got the numbers right here. He made a 3, so 1 of 4 from 3, 1 got blocked, and then was 6 of 15 from the field. We usually see it like closer to 8, whatever. He did have, because he didn't have the layups, he only has an HB dive type plays. He did have a turnaround fadeaway that was kind of the dagger towards the end of the game. I think that's when it clicked in my head, like, he's not quite right, because that fadeaway was usually he usually gets that dagger by attacking the rim, getting an and one layup, or pulling the defense and dropping off the jet one, right? Like, that's usually how those kinds of things go. That wasn't how this kind of thing went. And so we'll see. I will say that he is very calm and certain he's playing Saturday. He walked out of the gym, it sounds like, with 2 big bags of ice, 1 on each knee. So I guess A, we can't tell which one it was, but B, I think he is banged up. It's easy to remember, like, unlike Tremont and Marcus, he played all the games of last season. He's been the workhorse of this season in a lot of ways. He's usually the last guy that coach is pulling out of the game as he's pulling the starters out. Like, he is a guy that Houston has ridden all the way to this point. A lot of wear and tear on his body. With all of that, there was also a stretch where it felt like Juwan Roberts was going to be down. He got hit in the manhood, and he took a few minutes out. I have not seen anything more than that he got hit in the manhood and need to take a little bit more time out. But that was based on the way he talked to John Houston on the sideline. Like, that looked like what had happened. He came back in and played very well. I think that's all that happened. Obviously, we'll be following that a little bit closely as well. On the whole, amidst injuries and things like that, once you take out the turnovers, Houston had a pretty good offensive game. They just had 17 of them. They actually shot 49% from the field. You wish you'd had, they shot 25% from the three-point line. You wish you were closer to 33, 35. But I digress. On the whole, like, shooting 50% from the field in a game isn't terrible for Houston. But the 17 turnovers mean that, on top of missing half your shots, there's 17 times you didn't get a shot. Now, Houston had 11 offensive rebounds on 26 missed shots. We know that Sampson's going to harp on that not being high enough either. On the whole, though, with Sasser and Shead being a little banged up, it felt like the guards weren't getting involved in those aspects of the game until the young guys came in and kind of saved the literal day. We'll talk some about Emanuel Sharp and his contributions, as well as Jarace Walker and Terrance Arceneaux in a moment. But first, let's talk some about FanDuel. Now, FanDuel is the #1 sports book in America, and it is a great time to sign up because you can get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. It's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores to threes drained. Now, this week, they've already got Houston's next opponent up on FanDuel. Houston will be playing Auburn in Birmingham, Alabama. Yes, we're going to talk about that a lot in the next few days. But Houston opens up already as a 6.5-point favorite, and the over-under set at 130.5. Now, I'm looking at the way Houston plays, looking at the way Auburn plays, and I'm thinking in this one, I'm probably more likely to hit Houston, but by less than 6.5, because it will be a fairly true road game in most instances. And if I'm also a betting man, I'm probably taking the overall under. Auburn is a team that scores in the mid 70s per game, and Houston's been holding teams lower than their typical per game averages by 15 to 20%. Houston, we just saw win a game scoring in the 60s. I'm looking at this game being like 65 to 60. Maybe after free throws, it's like 67 to 62 or something like that. I'm seeing that. But with both of, I'm seeing it under 130.5. Now, admittedly, I'm hedging my bets after being very, very wrong on the opening round game. And so I'm telling you to do the same, but I'm telling you to do it at FanDuel Sportsbook. FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout at the same game parlay. So don't miss a chance with your no sweat first bet for $1,000 back in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/locked-on. That's FanDuel.com/locked-on. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right. So admittedly, they were banged up, but the upperclassmen kind of had troubles in this game. And so Houston was looking around for other people to step up. I thought we had to start with Jarace Walker, played 36 minutes, 2 huge blocks, like Sports Center, kind of blocks. One off the backboard in transition, pinned a guy, shot at the glass. I don't think that I think it was Xavier Rhodes. I don't think Xavier Rhodes of Northern Kentucky ever saw Jarace coming. Jarace is coming from the far right side of the screen, coming up and just like he misses with the left hand that came across his right and popped off the backboard. Big block at a key point in the game early in the first half. Second half, it looks like he's gotten beat by Chris Brandon on a driving basket. We should also point out Chris Brandon of Bel Air High School in Houston had a phenomenal game for them as far as beating up for rebounds, 7 offensive, 7 defensive rebounds from Northern Kentucky. Had a great game. He thinks he's beaten Jarace Walker on the drive. He's driving the basket, thinks he's got a nice left-hand layup, and Jarace comes from behind him and sends that thing into the third row. Big-time play out of Jarace, both at fairly crucial moments. I also thought that while Jarace did not attempt a three and had one bad charge after pump faking a three and driving for a floater, he got called for a charge on the floater. He should have just shot the three. On the whole, he shot 6 for 8 from the field. He did have 6 rebounds. He played kind of dirty, enforcing some loose ball kind of stuff coming back to Houston's way. 2 big blocks, like I mentioned. He also, for what it's worth, played tremendous defense and not allowing shots to get off, much less get blocked or whatever, in his 36 minutes. And while I have my complaints about how many offensive rebounds Houston let up, I didn't blame those on Jarace.
I found this on the web.
That was my watch. All right. I also think that another freshman and we're getting to Emanuel Sharp, I promise. Terrance Arceneaux, though, played very, very well in his 12 minutes. He played 7 minutes in the first half and played great defense in his role. Had his 2 points and a nice little mid-range jump shot. It was a putback on a missed mid-range jump shot. I got my notes here wrong. Putback, a nice missed mid-range jump shot, all in the air volleyball style. Great game out of him. He opens up the second half starting for Marcus Sasser. Once we find out Marcus Sasser is questionable, and Eric was played the second half after, if he's going to play, he wouldn't warm up for halftime and then come out and not start like that. Like, you don't sit down and get cold. But with that said, he only played a little over 4 minutes in the second half because quickly he got his normal rotational sub for Emanuel Sharp to come in the game. And then there was a stretch there where Emanuel Sharp just flat won the game. And I know we both like Emanuel. I know Emanuel is a great story because he suffered the catastrophic leg injury in December of 2021. Decides to graduate from high school early and come to redshirt to Houston so he can get working with the Houston PT and all that kind of stuff. So he was a redshirt freshman, air quotes, last year, but he's really a senior in high school last year. And then he spends his freshman year this year coming off the bench for a pair of dynamic guards, at least one of which is an NBA-bound guy. Works his way up to being, getting out of injury shape, back in game shape, etc. And then, frankly, has kind of had some defensive miscues as they've been putting more on his plate lately. They've been handing him matchups like Kendrick Davis in the Memphis game. That's a tough matchup for anyone in the country, let alone a freshman that, again, just 15 months ago had a major broken leg injury, right? Big time play, right? Big time player. He got put on his butt a little bit, but he's fine. It's basketball. He does it off. He's okay. Even in the first half of Thursday night's game, he got put on his butt once. And I was like, oh no, not again, Emanuel. And then I maintain there was something about the way he approached the game after that. He got subbed out shortly thereafter, but you saw it very quickly on the next defensive possession. He was chest to chest riding Xavier Rhodes, the point guard for Northern Kentucky, all over the floor. Got subbed out because the sub had gone to the table once he got put on his butt or whatever, and it wouldn't be the second half when he got back in the game. But he did get back in the game, subbing in for Terrance Arceneaux. And then there's a stretch where Houston was tie game, competitive, close game, and they came down as Emanuel Sharp 3, defensive stop, Emanuel Sharp 3, defensive stop. I think it was Jarace Walker 2, defensive stop, came down, and there was this Emanuel Sharp, like, crazy off-balance floater at the end of the shot clock after the ball kind of got scrambled around, put around, landed in his hands. He's like, it's 15 feet away, bomb, floater, right? Like, all of those things happened, and suddenly Houston was up 10. Now, Houston had their lead cut to 5 very quickly thereafter. Like, I don't mean to say the game was over, but for all intents and purposes, Houston rode that cushion for the rest of the night because Emanuel Sharp's sharp shooting, no pun really intended, but kind of intended, his sharp shooting leads to Houston building up that cushion. And Houston does flat out not win this game without Emanuel Sharp, full stop. Sasser's out, Shead's banged up, Tremont Mark shot the ball poorly. They need someone to figure it out. That guy was Emanuel Sharp, full stop. It worked. Emanuel Sharp came in the game. And frankly, as much as I love TA, Arceneaux wasn't shooting the ball like that. And Emanuel Sharp, after that initial blunder, was fine on defense. He played what was it, 23 total minutes in the game because once it realized the Norse, Northern Kentucky realized, oh, you can shoot a little bit, they kind of had to cover him differently. That meant they kind of had to cover him, not like they covered Marcus Sasser, but in a way that Houston was able to prepare for what they were doing. They went back to high-low. They hit Jarace a couple times, hit Juwan a couple. Like, all these things happened and started to snowball once Houston got in a rhythm because they had someone from behind the arc that could hit a shot, or that was at least someone that Northern Kentucky had respect. And in going into the Auburn game, I think that's going to be just as important. Houston's going to need to continue to find someone that in that case, Auburn has respect. Auburn beat Iowa in what was essentially a home game on Thursday afternoon, which means that Saturday's game is only going to be more of a home game for Auburn. So having a guy that can kind of quiet the crowd and hit a big three in a key moment is going to be really, really important. And that guy's going to have to be Emanuel Sharp. Now, other things to stick away from this game before we move on to the Auburn thing in the last segment, I do want to point out that Reggie Chaney as the junkyard dog type was great. It's just, it didn't, like, people like, why didn't Reggie play more? Why didn't Reggie play more? Why didn't JVA play more, etc. If I could combine Reggie Chaney and JVA Francis, we'd have a great time because junkyard dog Reggie Chaney gets away with things that JVA Francis seems to get called fouls on. And frankly, they complement each other really well. But the truth is, Houston had to play Jarace and Juwan because those two guys were dominating the basketball game, and they were the best thing going for Houston for like 30 of the 35 minutes they each played, right? And so I get the clamoring for Reggie and why didn't JVR play, etc. But I also look at this, I'm like, but that's just the exact same position they had to go with. Now, I've been asking for a Jarace Walker at the 3 lineup for a long time. I don't know that Auburn is the team that matches up with that necessarily. We'll talk more about them in a moment, and again, tomorrow's episode with Zach. But I do think it's worth investigating at some point if you're going to continue to have guards out, because bluntly, Juwan was able to play the 4 defensively when he needed to. He was able to stick with 6'5s and 6'6s along the perimeter. Fine. Jarace, we know, can guard anyone in America. Best defender this side of, the NBA. And I think that can work as your 3-4 lineup as far as who guards who. Just put Jarace on the more athletic 3 type, right? Whatever. Then you put Chaney or JVR at the 5. I think that's a lineup that Houston has to investigate at some point, and I just wish they'd done it earlier. I also wonder if they'll do some of that to go into a zone lineup against Auburn, because of some of the stuff Auburn does really, really well, and we've seen them go to zone at times, and guys are good at getting to the free throw line. But first, before we get to that segment, let's talk some about Built Bar, because Built Bar is building the madness. Now, Built March Madness bracket is here. We know that you have a favorite bar or puff, and now's your time to make it count. Go to builtmarchmadness.com to vote for your favorites. I'm going to be voting for the coconut almond bar, and I know if you want the Cougars to win, you'll be voting for that bar as well. So support your team, support your favorite bar or puff. And when you vote for your favorite bar or puff, you'll be entered to win a drawing with 50 lucky Locked On listeners to get a free box of Built. Yes, you heard that right. A free box of Built. Not only that, but one Locked On fan will get a 12-month subscription to Built to have Built's best bars or puffs delivered monthly straight to your door. You've got to try Built. Built, the best protein bar ever. Seriously, they're so amazing. You won't think they're good for you. What makes Built bars and puffs so good? Well, for starters, they're covered in 100% real chocolate and high in protein. That's right, real chocolate and high in protein. Run to builtmarchmadness.com right now to vote for your favorite bar or puff and pick up a box while you're there. You can vote every day in March, so hop in and support your pick. All right. So I said I want to talk something about Auburn, and these are preliminary thoughts. I watched parts of the Auburn-Iowa game before Houston played. I was also switching back and forth. There was a moment where I felt like Texas might lose to Colgate. There was a lot of madness going on Thursday. They don't call it March Beauty Contest. They call it March Madness. And there was a couple guys I took down in my notes as far as like the guys I need to pay attention to from Auburn. Again, we're doing another episode on Saturday. Zach and I are going to record something that's going to go to one of those channels. So Zach, host of Locked On Auburn, will be also on to tell us more about them. But the first guy, the kind of like head of the snake guy that you need to stop when you're looking at Auburn, is Wendell Green. Wendell Green is a small, like feisty point guard from Detroit, kind of wears like the Detroit, Michigan toughness, think like, industry kind of guy. But he's 5'11", $170, and like feisty. And I don't mean that like he's a spark plug kind of guy, really, really quick. Think like if the Kihei Clark guy from Virginia had some attitude to him, like that kind of an athlete and swagger. He also is like an attack the rim, get downhill kind of guy. He's a 4.2 assists per game kind of guy. And I say to say like he has the ability to find the drop offs and stuff like that. He's really, really quick and shifty. And I think what's interesting in watching him play in that Iowa game was it appears that he's doing a really good job getting the free throw line. And I'm sure Zach will tell us more about this tomorrow. But he's doing a really good job at attacking in the free throw line. And worth pointing out, he's an 80% free throw shooter that has made like 30 something in a row, right? So he's got the all-time Auburn consecutive free throws made streak, and he's like shooting out of his head right now. So we got to like find some way to slow him down. My initial thought would be that is the Jamal Shead matchup. However, with his health kind of in question, I wonder if that's the Terrance Arceneaux matchup. We'll see. The other guy that stuck out to me as far as someone that Houston has to keep an eye on is their big man, Johnny Broome. Johnny Broome is listed at 6'10", 235. I'd imagine he's more like a long 6'9.5" and like 245. I thought he was heavier than they listed him as, but I digress. He's your classic, can get you double-double type of big. He's not going to do anything that stretches the floor crazy, but he has high energy, long. I guess his average, it says here, are 14 points and 8.5 rebounds a game. I was impressed by his energy around the basket. I think it's a tough matchup, but a good matchup for Juwan Roberts. That would be my guy that they go to there. Jalen Williams, I think, is the other forward you got to pay attention to. He's a natural matchup for Jarace. Jarace is 6'9", 240. Jalen is 6'8", 230 on the way they're listed. Jalen is a classic pick and pop big. He'll be playing some outside the three-point line and all those kind of places that Jarace is uniquely fit to cover. Jarace is a great matchup for him. I think that Houston wins that matchup, even though Jalen is a 4-year kind of guy. Again, he's a 36% three-point shooter, though, so Jarace has to be sure to stay down and not foul the guy shooting threes. The other person, if anyone, that Houston needs to watch out for specifically, of course, that means someone else will go off because I'm not talking about them, but KD Johnson is a third-year guard. He's a more traditional off-ball guard, but he's only 6'1", 190. Now, that is noticeably bigger than 5'11", 170 in Wendell Green, but so like they look similar, but he's a tough kid from Atlanta, KD is, and he's 8.8 points per game guy. It looks like, looking at his game logs, he can give you 12, 15. He can give you 4 or 6, depending on what's going on there, right? So Houston's got all kinds of options to cover that. Again, if Jamal is not on Wendell Green but playing, he probably draws KD Johnson, if not vice versa. That is to say that they're a kind of basketball team that against a man defense, we looking to attack pick and rolls and get downhill. I imagine with Johnny Broome, they also slip a lot of their pick and rolls. So they try and slip something to get some more to the rim. Houston's seen this a lot this season. It's going to be reliant on that backside defender tagging the roller. I think the nice thing about it for Houston, and again, this is on the season averages, but Auburn's not the kind of team that's going to beat you by bombing a bunch of three-pointers. On the season as a whole, where to go? I just had it. On the season as a whole, though, they are shooting 23s a game and just 31% from them. So that, if anything, means that the backside defender ought to be more quick and able to tag the roll, leading to a cross-out block out on the backside, because you're not so worried about your guy in the corner hitting a cross-court pass for a three, because that's not something that they're great at. Again, 21 three-pointers per game attempted would put them at 227th in all of college basketball. They're 31% from the beyond the arc. It puts them at 32nd or 323rd. I'm sorry, I'm reading this. 323rd in college basketball. So not their cup of tea. What is their cup of tea is playing at home. And unfortunately for Houston, this kind of works as a de facto road game. Now, we'll talk more about it on Saturday, Sunday, Monday. I'm sure it'll come up with Zach as well. But the tournament committee is kind of being unapologetic about making this a de facto home game in the second round for Auburn, even though they work so hard supposedly to not make it to make sure it doesn't happen in the first round. Now, I've seen no addressing as to why the first round versus second round matchup is the exact same location, so why would it matter? But they try to not give the upper seed a disadvantage, and Auburn was the 9 seed playing a glorified home game just under 120 minutes away from campus in the first round as well. So that's going to be a big, big part of this. Houston is undefeated on the true road this year. I guess they did lose that Memphis game in the tournament without Sasser, so that gives some cause for concern. However, that was also the day after his injury. You're trying to scramble together and figure out what happened and all of that kind of stuff, right? It's also the third time you played Memphis in a month. And so, there's some of the, how do you, game plan a new game plan for something you've seen over and over again? Healthy Houston on a neutral floor, I feel really, really confident in Houston this one. I'm not going to lie to you. Playing them a little banged up in a road game 48 hours after the game we just had has me little cause for concern. I weirdly think there's some ways that Northern Kentucky was almost a more difficult matchup because the way that they played, and especially when you factor in the way they play defense in that matchup zone versus Houston shooting the ball so poorly from beyond the arc. Auburn's a little bit more aggressive and more tactical in their man. So we'll see how the matchup shakes out. We preview with Zach on tomorrow's episode, so make sure you check that out before the game. The game is set to tip off at 6:10 Central Time, although it is after other games being played in the same arena. So, things are obviously subject to change there. Thank you all so much for tuning in to Locked On Cougs Day. Locked On Cougs is the primary of the Locked On Podcast Network. If you're looking for another listen for today, let me recommend Locked On College Basketball, because Andy and Isaac are running a great show. They're also talking about the entirety of March Madness at a national perspective each and every day. So make sure you go give them a subscribe and listen and all of those good things. Locked On Cougs, again, is a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team, or in our case, number one team in the country, every day. Go Cougs.